Snapchat map horror story. #1. This story was sent to me by Sarah Martinez via email. I was running through the park at 2 in the morning, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode, when I realized the man behind me wasn't just out for a late-night jog. He'd been following me for the past 20 minutes, matching my exact pace, turning every corner I turned. But let me back up and tell you how this all started. I was 19 and had just moved to Portland for college. Being new to the city, I was pretty lonely and desperate to make friends. That's when I discovered Snapchat Map. For those who don't know, it's this feature that shows you where all your Snapchat friends are located in real time. You can see little avatars of people on an actual map. And if they're posting stories, you can see what they're up to. I've been using it to find cool spots around the city where other students hung out. It was actually pretty useful. I'd see clusters of people at certain bars or events and know those were good places to meet people my age. I thought I was being smart about it, only sharing my location with people I actually knew. One evening, I was bored in my dorm room when I noticed this guy named Jake had been viewing all my stories. We'd matched on a dating app a few weeks earlier, but never met up. He seemed nice enough in our brief conversations. He was also a student, supposedly at a nearby college. When I checked Snapchat Map, I could see he was at this trendy coffee shop downtown that I'd been wanting to try. I decided to be spontaneous. I got dressed up, took the bus downtown, and posted a story from outside the coffee shop. Within minutes, Jake had viewed it and sent me a message saying he was inside and asking if I wanted to join him. It felt like fate, but when I walked into the coffee shop, I couldn't find anyone who looked like his profile pictures. I texted him and he said he was in the back corner by the window. I looked around confused. There was no one there. That's when I got another message from him saying he just stepped out to take a call, but would be right back. I waited for about 10 minutes, feeling increasingly awkward. The barista kept glancing at me with concern. Finally, I decided to check Snapchat Map again to see where Jake was. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. According to the map, Jake was standing right outside the coffee shop. But when I looked through the window, there was no one there. I refreshed the app, thinking it was glitching. But no, the little avatar showing Jake's location was positioned exactly where I was sitting. It was like he was in the same spot as me, but he wasn't. Unless he was somehow tracking my location and spoofing his own to match mine. My hands started shaking as I realized what was happening. This wasn't a coincidence. Jake had been monitoring my location and had somehow manipulated his own location on the app to make it seem like we were in the same place. He'd probably been watching me this whole time, maybe from across the street or from a car. I got up quickly and walked toward the bathroom, trying to act casual while my mind raced. In the bathroom, I immediately changed my Snapchat settings to ghost mode, which hides your location from everyone. Then I called my roommate and asked her to stay on the phone with me while I figured out how to get home safely. When I came out of the bathroom, I noticed a man in a baseball cap sitting at a table near the front of the coffee shop. He had a laptop open, but he wasn't really looking at it. He was watching me. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away, but I could feel him tracking my movements. I decided to test my theory. I told my roommate I was going to leave through the back exit if there was one, and asked her to keep talking to me. As I walked toward the rear of the coffee shop, I saw the man in the baseball cap close his laptop and stand up. My heart started racing. There was no back exit. I was trapped. The man was now walking toward me, and I realized he was much larger than I'd initially thought. I couldn't see his face clearly under the cap, but something about his posture and the way he moved made every instinct in my body scream danger. Turned around and walked briskly toward the front exit, phone pressed to my ear, speaking loudly. to my roommate so anyone nearby would know I was connected to someone. The man followed me, maintaining the same distance. When I reached the door, I practically ran outside. That's when the real nightmare began. As I started walking quickly toward the bus stop, I realized the man had followed me out of the coffee shop. He was about 50 feet behind me, trying to look casual, but clearly following my exact path. I told my roommate what was happening, and she said she was calling campus security. I ducked into a busy restaurant and asked to use their phone to call a taxi. While I waited, I watched through the window as the man stood across the street, pretending to look at his phone, but obviously watching the restaurant entrance. The taxi driver had to wait 15 minutes because of traffic, and the whole time, this guy just stood there. When the taxi finally arrived, I ran out and jumped in, giving the driver my dorm address. As we pulled away, I saw the man running toward a car parked nearby. My blood turned to ice when I realized he was planning to follow the taxi. I told the driver about the situation, and he was incredibly helpful. Instead of going straight to my dorm, he drove to the police station. The man in the car followed us for about 10 blocks before apparently realizing where we were headed and turning off at the police station. I filed a report and showed them the Snapchat conversations. The officer explained that what had happened was called location spoofing. The person had used software to fake their GPS location on social media apps. It's apparently more common than people realize, and it's often used by predators to lure victims to specific locations. They took the report seriously, but said it would be difficult to track down Jake since he was likely using a fake name and possibly a fake profile. They advised me to change all my social media settings to private and never share my location with anyone I hadn't met in person. For weeks after that, I was paranoid about going anywhere alone. I kept checking over my shoulder, afraid I'd see that man in the baseball cap again. I never did find out who he really was or what he was planning to do if he'd gotten me alone. But I learned a valuable lesson about how easily technology can be manipulated by people with bad intentions. Snapchat map horror story number 2. I found this on a Reddit thread by user midnight_walker94. The notification sound kept going off every few minutes. But when I checked my phone, there were no new messages. That's when I noticed someone had been taking screenshots of my location on Snapchat map every time I moved. By the time I realized what was happening, they'd been tracking my every movement for 3 days straight. I'm a 22-year-old college student, and like most people my age, I'm pretty active on social media. I share my location with close friends so we can meet up easily, and I post stories about where I'm going and what I'm doing. I thought I was being safe about it. I only shared my location with people I actually knew, and I kept my settings pretty private. It was the middle of fall semester, and I was working at this off-campus job at a bookstore downtown. My schedule was pretty consistent. I worked Tuesday through Saturday, usually the same shifts. I'd often post stories from work when things were slow, just random stuff like cool books I'd found or funny customers. One day, I started getting these weird notifications. You know how Snapchat tells you when someone takes a screenshot of your story? I was getting those notifications, but when I checked to see who had screenshotted what, I couldn't find anything. The notifications would show up, but there would be no record of anyone actually taking screenshots. At first, I thought it was just a glitch. Snapchat has bugs sometimes, and I figured the notifications were just misfiring. But it kept happening, usually when I was at work or traveling between home and work. The timing seemed too specific to be random. Then I started noticing this guy who seemed to show up wherever I was. Not obviously following me, but just there. At the coffee shop I stopped at before work. At the bus stop I used, at the grocery store near my apartment. He was probably in his 30s, average height, always wearing different clothes, but somehow I started recognizing him. The thing is, he never approached me or did anything obviously threatening. He'd just be there, in the background, like part of the scenery. But I started noticing that he always seemed to have his phone out, and sometimes he'd be pointing it in my direction. One evening, I was closing up the bookstore alone when I got that screenshot notification again. This time, I decided to really dig into my Snapchat settings to figure out what was going on. That's when I discovered something terrifying. In the privacy settings, there's a section that shows you who has viewed your location in the past 24 hours. I'd never really paid attention to it before, but when I checked it that night, I saw that someone had been viewing my location constantly, like every few minutes. For the past week, the username was something generic, like Mike_Johnson_87, and the profile picture was just a default avatar. I didn't recognize the name, and I couldn't figure out how this person had gotten access to my location. I was sure I hadn't added anyone by that name. I looked through my friends list and found the profile. It had been added about a month ago, but I had no memory of adding this person. The profile was completely empty. No stories, no friends visible, no personal information. It was like a ghost account. The really creepy part was when I looked at the location viewing history. This person had been checking my location multiple times every single day. They'd viewed it when I was at home, at work, at the grocery store, at friends' houses. They knew everywhere I went, and when I went there, I immediately blocked the account and changed all my privacy settings. But the damage was already done. Someone had been stalking me digitally for weeks, and I had no idea who it was or why they were doing it. That's when I started putting together the pieces. The guy I'd been seeing around town, the weird timing of the screenshot notifications, the fact that this person seemed to know exactly where I'd be and when. Someone was using my Snapchat location to track me in real life. The next day at work, I was extra vigilant. Sure enough, about an hour into my shift, I saw the same guy walk past the bookstore window. He slowed down when he passed, looking inside, and I saw him take out his phone. A few minutes later, I got another screenshot notification. I was terrified. This person wasn't just watching me online. They were following me in person and documenting where I was. I had no idea what they were planning to do with that information, but it couldn't be good. I called my manager and explained the situation. She was amazing about it. She said I could leave early and that she'd make sure someone else was always working with me until we figured out what to do. She also suggested I call the police. The police took a report, but they said it was difficult to prove stalking based on social media activity alone. They suggested I document everything and call them if the person made any direct contact, or if I felt immediately threatened. For the next few days, I was constantly looking over my shoulder. I changed my routine, took different routes to work, and stopped posting any location-based stories. I also went through all my social media accounts and locked down every privacy setting I could find. About a week later, I was working an evening shift when my manager called me into the back office. She said a man had come into the store asking about me, when I worked, what my schedule was, if I was single. When she refused to give him any information, he'd gotten angry and started demanding to know why she was being so secretive. The description she gave me matched the guy I'd been seeing around town. She said he'd left when she threatened to call the police, but not before making some comment about how he already knew everything he needed to know about me anyway. That was the last straw. I filed another police report, this time with more concrete evidence of harassment. I also contacted Snapchat directly to report the fake account and ask how someone could have added me without my knowledge. Snapchat's support team was actually really helpful. They explained that sometimes people can add you if they have your phone number or if you've connected your contacts to the app. They can also add you if you've joined a group chat together, even briefly. The person might have gotten my number through a mutual friend or some other means. They permanently banned the account and helped me set up additional security measures. But the whole experience made me realize how vulnerable we all are when we share our locations on social media. Someone with bad intentions can use that information to learn everything about your routine, your habits, where you live and work. I never found out who was stalking me or what they were planning. The guy stopped showing up around my usual spots after I reported him to the police, but I still get nervous sometimes when I'm out alone. I've learned to be much more careful about what I share online and who I share it with. The scariest part is that this person was able to track me for weeks before I even noticed. If I hadn't gotten curious about those screenshot notifications, they might have been watching me for months, learning my patterns, waiting for the right opportunity to do something worse. Snapchat map horror story number 3. A viewer sent this through my contact form. I was sitting in my car in an empty parking lot at midnight, watching a stranger walk directly toward me, when I realized I'd made a terrible mistake trusting someone I'd met through Snapchat map. The person approaching my car wasn't the teenage girl I'd been chatting with online. It was a grown man, and he was walking with purpose, like he'd been planning this moment for a long time. Let me explain how I ended up in that situation. I'm 17, and I live in a pretty small town where there's not much to do, especially during the week. Most of my friends had curfews or part-time jobs, so I was often bored in the evenings with nothing to do but scroll through social media. I'd been using Snapchat Map to see what other people my age were up to around town. It was kind of fascinating to see where everyone was hanging out. You could see clusters of people at the local hangouts, and sometimes you'd discover new places you didn't know about. One night, I noticed someone new on the map, a profile that said Emma_local16, who seemed to be around my age and lived in the same area. Her story showed her at places I recognized, like the mall and the movie theater. She seemed normal, posting typical teenage stuff about being bored and wanting to meet new people. I sent her a message, just something casual about how I'd seen her around town on the map, and asking if she wanted to hang out sometime. She responded quickly and seemed really friendly. We started chatting regularly, and she told me she was 16, had just moved to town, and was having trouble making friends at her new school. Over the next few weeks, we talked constantly. She seemed to know a lot about the local area despite claiming to be new, and she always had suggestions for places we could meet up. But every time we made plans, something would come up at the last minute, and she'd have to cancel. She'd send me screenshots of text messages from her parents saying she was grounded, or photos of homework she had to finish, or excuses about feeling sick. It was frustrating, but I believed her because the explanations seemed legitimate, and she always seemed genuinely disappointed about having to cancel. The weird thing was, even though we'd never met in person, Emma seemed to know a lot about my routine. She'd comment on places I'd been even when I hadn't posted about them, or she'd mentioned seeing me around town when I couldn't remember seeing her. When I asked her about it, she'd say she was just really observant, or that she'd seen me from a distance. One evening, Emma messaged me saying she was finally free to hang out. Her parents were out of town, and she wanted to meet up somewhere. We could talk without worrying about running into people from school. She suggested this empty parking lot behind a closed shopping center, somewhere quiet where we could sit in our cars and chat. I should have realized how weird that suggestion was, but I was so excited to finally meet her that I didn't think it through. She said she'd drive her mom's car, a blue Honda, and that she'd flash her headlights twice so I'd know it was her. The parking lot was completely empty when I arrived. It was behind a strip mall that had been mostly vacant for years, and there were no streetlights. I parked under one of the few working lights and waited Feeling a little nervous about the isolated location, about 10 minutes later, I saw headlights approaching. A car pulled into the parking lot and flashed its lights twice, just like Emma had said. But as it got closer, I realized it wasn't a blue Honda. It was a dark pickup truck. The truck parked about 50 feet away from me, and I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat. They didn't get out or signal to me in any way. I sent Emma a message asking if that was her, and she responded saying she was running a few minutes late, but would be there soon. That's when I realized something was very wrong. The person in the truck had flashed their lights like Emma said she would, but Emma was claiming she wasn't there yet. Either Emma was lying or someone else knew about our meeting and was pretending to be her. I started my car, planning to leave, but the truck immediately started up too. As I pulled toward the exit, the truck began following me. I could see in my rearview mirror that it was a large man driving, definitely not a teenage girl. I drove toward the main road, hoping the truck would turn off and go in a different direction. But it followed me for several blocks, matching my speed and staying about a car length behind me. When I turned, it turned. When I slowed down, it slowed down. I was starting to panic. I pulled into a gas station that was still open, hoping the bright lights and potential witnesses would make the truck driver back off. But instead of leaving, the truck pulled into the parking lot and parked near the entrance, blocking my car. Then, I sat there for a few minutes, trying to figure out what to do. The man in the truck was just sitting there, waiting. I could see him watching me in his side mirror. I tried calling Emma, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Finally, I decided to go into the gas station and ask the clerk to call the police. As soon as I opened my car door, the truck driver got out of his vehicle. He was a big guy, probably in his 40s, wearing a baseball cap and a hoodie. He started walking toward me with this confident stride, like he knew exactly what he was doing. I ran into the gas station and told the clerk what was happening. He looked out the window and saw the man standing by my car, looking through the windows. The clerk immediately called the police and told me to stay inside until they arrived. While we waited, I tried to piece together what had happened. I checked Emma's Snapchat profile more carefully than I ever had before. That's when I noticed things that should have been red flags from the beginning. All of her posted stories were screenshots of other people's content, not original photos. The few selfies she'd sent me in private messages were low quality and looked like they could have been stolen from someone else's social media accounts. Her location on Snapchat map was always shown in general areas, never specific addresses. The police arrived within 10 minutes, but by then the man had gotten back in his truck and left. The officer took my statement and explained that what had happened was called catfishing. Someone had created a fake profile to lure me to an isolated location. The officer said this was becoming more common, especially with apps like Snapchat that make it easy to track someone's location and movements. Predators create fake profiles of teenagers to build trust with their victims, then use that trust to get them alone in vulnerable situations. They tried to trace the Emma account, but it had been deleted. The phone number associated with it was from a prepaid phone that couldn't be traced back to a real person. Whoever had been pretending to be Emma had covered their tracks well. The scariest part was realizing how much information I'd shared with this person over the weeks we'd been talking. They knew where I went to school, where I worked, what my schedule was like, and where I hung out with friends. They'd been collecting information about me while pretending to be a teenage girl who just wanted to be friends. I never found out who was behind the fake account or what they were planning to do when they got me alone in that parking lot. The police said I was lucky. I trusted my instincts and left when things felt wrong, because the situation could have been much worse. Since then, I've been much more careful about who I talk to online, and especially about meeting people I've only met through social media. I learned that just because someone has a convincing profile and knows local information doesn't mean they are who they claim to be. People with bad intentions can be very skilled at creating believable fake identities to manipulate their victims. Whole experience taught me that apps like Snapchat Map, while fun and useful for staying connected with real friends, can also be tools that predators use to find and track potential victims. I still use the app, but now I'm much more selective about who can see my location and much more skeptical of people who want to meet up in isolated places.